Hey everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Artisan Pirate here, and in today's fun scroll saw project video, we are going to be doing some more compound cutting over at the scroll saw. As a matter of fact, it's going to be another multi-part compound cut scroll saw project, which is really neat. It really shows off what a scroll saw is capable of, and I really like doing compound cut projects over here on the platform visually so you guys can see the versatility of a scroll saw. It can not only cut out flat two-dimensional pieces, but with a little bit of time and effort it can take it into the third dimension with compound cutting, as I will show you in today's video. Now the design has already been printed out to its full size, prepped and attached to our material with clear packing tape, and the design is an older Steve Good design, so please be aware of that if you would like to go and download it out of his pattern catalog and try this project out in your garage or workshop. Now for the past several compound cut videos I have posted over here on the platform, we have been slowly milling down this block of pine material that I got up at the hardwood store of North Carolina, and it's getting smaller and smaller as we continually mill it down to the proper dimensions for featured compound cut scroll saw project videos. But this is not going to be the material that we are using in today's video. Of course, I love using pine to teach with visually over here on the platform because it cuts, sands, shapes and contours exceptionally well, and it's just a readily available material that I can easily pick up and teach with over here on the platform. The material we are going to be using today is off-cut basic dimensional construction grade 2x4s. And if you guys remember last year, heading towards the Christmas time, my buddy Chuck Coates came by and he told his powerful story over here on the platform. Before he came over to the workshop, we met up in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and he gave me a nice sized box of off-cut 2x4s and off-cut dimensional lumber. He knew someone that was just going to throw all them out, and he said, I know a buddy, speaking of me, that would love to have them to make some projects out of. So I want to thank my buddy Chuck for thinking of me. That is what this material came out of, and this started as off-cut 2x4s. Again, the box was full of them, and you can see that construction grade 2x4s have the knots, have the imperfections in them. I just milled everything that I had down over on the table saw to the correct dimensions for the pattern that Steve Good has, and this is the proper dimensions. And I hope it goes without saying with compound cutting that you need to, of course, make sure that your table saw where your material is milled down, as well as your scroll saw where you're going to be doing the scrolling, is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees to make sure everything comes out perfectly and properly. I hope that makes sense. But here is some of the leftovers, and I even took a scrap piece that I off-cut over at the table saw and cut a little piece out of it just to see how well the number 5 ultra reverse tooth blades that I love to use was going to work with the material. Keep in mind, in my area where I am, 2x4s for construction use usually come in pine or spruce. I don't know what they are in the big wide world out there, if they come in different species. I think you can also get like big redwood 2x4s out in California or stuff like that, but in my area they come in pine and spruce. But here is an offcut, and that one even had a pocket hole in them. I don't know what the person was making out of the pieces that were the offcuts in the box that my buddy Chuck gave me. But here is the design. As I said, it has already been printed out to its full size, prepped and attached to the material with clear packing tape, and it's going to be a nice little miniature three-dimensional flower in a vase. You're going to have 2 leaves that you're going to have to cut out here, and they are a little bit smaller, so we'll be very careful with how we hold those over at the scroll saw. Of course, you can use a compound cutting jig if you want to give yourself more surface area to grip to, but again, I feel confident with my abilities over at the scroll saw to just hold these without the use of additional clamps or jigs or things like that. I hope that makes sense. And then we're going to have the flower itself, and those 2 leaves I just held up will be glued on either side, so you're going to have some leaves on the stem, and then you're going to have the vase that the flower is going to go down into. So a really cool creative design to use up some of those scrap 2x4s out in the workshop. Now we are going to have to drill a hole in the top just down to about halfway to accept the flower down into the vase, and we're going to have to step over to the drill press to do that. And I've got a 3D printed center finder here for pin turning. I did turn a few pins a few years ago, and my mom's actually turned a pin out here in the workshop, and she really liked the process. But this was a free file that I found on the, I believe it was the Thingiverse website, to find the center of pin turning blanks. And what you basically do is line it up here, and we're going to use this to get our center to line up over at the drill press, and we're going to mark it that way, and we will mark it that way. Now we have our X marks the spot for pirates everywhere, so really cool. But now we have our center that we are going to take this piece over to the drill press and drill that cavity out that will accept the flower once it is cut out later on in the video. And since everything is pretty much prepped and prepared, let's move the camera on over to the drill press so we can drill the hole in the vase so we can come back to the scroll saw and get started. And over here on the drill press, we're going to take a small Forstner bit to drill a hole in the center to the best of our abilities to accept the flower into the vase we are going to be cutting out. And then stepping over to the scroll saw, I've got a fresh number 5 Ultra reverse tooth blade loaded into the scroll saw, and we'll quickly double check to make sure everything is dialed in at a perfect 90 degrees with the 3D printed blade alignment jig, and then we'll be ready to begin scrolling. Now, due to the thickness of the material here, over an inch thick due to compound cutting, of course the feed rate over at the scroll saw is going to be a lot slower as opposed to scrolling through thinner 1/4 inch or 3/4 inch material, so I am of course taking my time and letting the blade do the work. If you guys would like to try this pattern, it's available as a free pattern download over at Steve Good's scrollsawworkshop.blogspot.com website over in his free pattern catalog, and it is one of his older designs. We've now cut the one side of the vase and one of the leaves on the flower, and now we are cutting the flower itself, and it does have some sharp turns here. I'm just guiding the scroll saw blade through the material, again taking my time and letting the blade do the work. But once we get all of one side of the compound cut done, we will quickly step over to the workbench and we will remove all of the pieces after we get done with the final leaf here. And I'll carefully remove everything and take a paintbrush and removed all of that excess sawdust. That sawdust can catch on the scroll saw blade and produce burn and friction marks, and this is a totally optional step. You do not have to do it. You can of course stay right at your scroll saw and tape everything back together, but as you can see here, I'm taping everything back together with the clear packing tape that I used to originally attach the pattern to our material with. But I will lock everything back in place with the clear packing tape, and then we will step back over to the scroll saw to complete the compound cuts. We have now rotated the piece and we are cutting out the other side. We will complete the actual flower here, and the feed rate for the other side is usually a little bit quicker, but still keep a firm grasp on your workpiece during the whole scrolling process, because the scroll saw can want to grab the material and jerk it out of your hands, especially when I was cutting out the spot where the hole was drilled in the top of the vase there. I hope that makes sense. If you guys like what you're seeing, I would highly encourage you to subscribe to my channel and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. I'd really appreciate the support. But we are now completing all of the scroll saw work. Didn't take long really to cut all of the pieces out. But now we will step back over to the workbench and remove the pieces from the waste wood for the final time. And I'll be careful with the pieces because I don't want to break anything. We have our two leaves there, and here we have the vase that has the hole drilled in the top of it, and then we have the compound cut flower itself. But after all of the pieces are carefully removed, it'll be time to do some sanding, and I'll sand everything by hand and with sanding sponges, beginning here with the small sanding drum in the Marathon rotary tool by Bearwood Supply that Sterling Davis kindly gave me. And I'm just doing some touch-up sanding here, knocking off all of the sharp corners. And then I'll take a Klingspor Woodworking Shop sanding sponge here and do some final touch-up sanding. and you can sand the project as much or as little as you want to. But now it'll be time for glue up with the medium grade CA glue and activator, and the leaves here are just glued with simple butt joints, so you have to be very careful when attaching them, and they can very easily break off. So once they were glued in place, I was very careful with the flower itself. But after the glue had dried and cured for around 5 minutes, I gave the project 2 shades of Minwax wood stain. I stained the actual flower a lighter shade of Minwax wood stain to still allow the natural grains to shine through, and for the vase we went with a darker shade. And I set them both aside to dry, and after they had dried, I finished them with several coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss. And once that had dried, the project was complete. And here we have the completed miniature flower in a vase design, cut out completely over on the scroll saw from start to finish using the very versatile compound cutting technique. It finished up beautifully. Really happy with how this came out. I want to once again thank Steve Good for another fantastic design from his pattern catalog. Once again, it's one of his older pattern offerings in case you guys would like to go and download and try the pattern for yourself out in your garage or workshop. Made completely out of upcycled construction grade scrap 2x4 pieces that my buddy Chuck Coates give to me. Thank you, buddy, for thinking of me and giving those to me. Here is another one of those offcuts. So we took just rough dimensional construction grade lumber, and with a little bit of time and effort over at the scroll saw, we made this beautiful flower in a vase design. But I really hope a design like this really shows off what a scroll saw is capable of. As I said at the beginning of the video, not only can they cut out flat two-dimensional pieces that are beautiful in their own way, but with a little bit of time, patience, and effort over at the scroll saw, you can go into the third dimension with beautiful little projects like this here. Really happy with how it came out. You can easily tell what it is. Of course, the flower is kind of just free floating in the vase there, so you can pick it up and look at it, but you do have the beautiful summertime flower there, or springtime flower if you want to see it that way, in a nice little decorative vase. It took me around 30 to 35 minutes to scroll everything out completely from start to finish. It's really not an overly complex design. It's just with the nature of you cutting through an 1.5 inch block of material, you need to, of course, take your time and let the blade do the work and be as loyal as you can be to the cut line. And it's a very slow cut because, again, of the thickness of the material. And taking your time over at the scroll saw, you do not want to be aggressive and have that blade warp within the material, because then once you are done with your cuts, the piece will not slide apart as it is supposed to with the nature of compound cutting. But when I went to finishing, I finished the project in a standard rustic finishing way. I stained the flower and the leaves on the flower a very light shade of Minwax wood stain. The shade I used is Golden Pecan, and it's light enough to still allow the natural grains and textures of the material we used to shine through without masking them off in any way, shape, or form. And then for the vase, we used another Minwax wood stain, a dark walnut stain is the name of that one. But really cool, kind of a nice two-toned appearance, so you can really differentiate the two pieces, the vase and the flower itself, when it is sitting on a shelf, desk, or countertop. Again, very easy to display a project like this, and it's a great way to make something to use up scrap 2x4s you may have laying around in your garage or workshop. Again, I know pretty much everyone that likes to tinker or build things out in their garage or workshops, they usually have a few offcuts of 2x4s, and a project like this just shows a great way to upcycle them without throwing them into the garbage, into the dump, or into the wood stove or something like that. You can make beautiful and creative designs like this over on the scroll saw. When I glued the flower petals onto the stem, keep in mind it is just basic butt joints, and on a close-up there you can see the CA glue I used. So it is a very fragile glue up there, and if you were too aggressive with this, you could potentially break the leaves off of the flower stem, so just be very careful with it. They are just simple butt joints. But again, they are not glued together, although you could glue them together for a more sturdy appearance on a shelf desk or countertop. But I really like the option to be able to pick it up and pass it around or pose with it for some photos or things like that. And I also feel like if you just wanted to cut out the flower itself, you could give this as an everlasting flower. You know, this flower is not going to wilt, the petals are not going to fall off, and it's not going to dry up. It will again be everlasting. So a really cool gift idea for a loved one or a sweetheart or a significant other to make and give as a gift. Of course, you don't have to just cut out one. You could cut out a whole bouquet of them for a nice little wooden flower arrangement. But I feel if you want to properly display it, you could of course do the vase as well, that is included in the PDF pattern pack you download from Steve Good's website. And for an overall finish, we sprayed everything with a few coats of Rust-Oleum clear gloss to allow the natural grains and textures to shine through and give it a nice glossy appearance that you can see reflected there in the lights of the workshop and give it protection for years to come. As I said, this is made from basic construction grade off-cut 2x4s that are readily available in most areas. And the material that I had, again, most 2x4s in my area are made out of basic pine or spruce, and it cut over at the scroll saw almost like pine does. There was a hard spot in the flower, and you guys see me sand off that burn mark there in the time-lapse portion with my Marathon rotary tool that Sterling Davis gave me. So I'm not sure what was going on right there, but it was just a dense spot in the lumber, and there was also a knot on the vase there when we cut it out. But I think it adds character to the overall design and display of a little simplistic project like this. Now again, made from basic 2x4s, but with options and versatility, you could of course mill down exotic or hardwoods to cut this unique project out of over at the scroll saw. Just keep in mind, if you cut out the proper material to this thickness, 1.5 inches square all the way around, that is a lot of material to cut through over at the scroll saw. So I want to reiterate taking your time and letting the blade do the work and being as loyal as you can be to the cut line, because if you are too aggressive with the cut over at the scroll saw, and keep in mind if you use harder or denser materials, the cut's going to be that much more slower. The blade has a tendency to warp within the material, and when you get done with all your cuts, the piece will not be able to slide apart as it is supposed to with the nature of compound cutting, and I hope that that makes sense. But just a really beautiful summertime or springtime design, and of course I stained this one, but you can go above and beyond and take acrylic craft paints and paint it up to make it look as lifelike as you want to. You could paint a nice little design on the vase. You could paint the flower head itself a nice bright color, the stem, the leaves, some green. You could paint the veins and the leaves on it if you wanted to. You can really go above and beyond when you start painting scroll saw woodworking projects that you make. But again, always options and versatility for each and every scroll saw woodworking pattern and project you come across. And this is a multi-part compound cut project, and this is the third one that we have done over here on the platform, I believe. I know earlier in the year we done this floral themed candle holder that was made of several pieces, and then we also cut out more recently the medieval dragon that is also multiple parts cut out, but when you put them all together they make a beautiful three-dimensional image just like this. But really, really cool. I had a lot of fun in today's video, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching today's video, and hopefully from the intro all the way until now as we are closing the video, you guys picked up a tip, trick, or tidbit along the way. But one more look at it. Again, I didn't glue them together because I just love the display option of being able to pick it up and looking at it all the way around. But really, really cool. Miniature compound cut flower in a vase. That's going to be about all for this one. If you're new to the channel, hopefully you'll click that subscribe button and also follow me across all my social media feeds under the Artisan Pirate name. As always, links to contact me as well as all my social media feeds will always be linked down in the description box below these videos. That's about all for this one, and remember guys, if I can make it or do it, so can you guys. I'm the Artisan Pirate. Take care, and I'll see you guys real soon.